The Texas sun burned hot over Hollow Creek, turning the dirt road into a trail of dust and heat. A few horses stamped their hooves by the hitching post outside the saloon, restless in the dry wind. But no one had come for whiskey or cards that morning. The crowd stood gathered for something else. Something uglier. On the old saloon steps sat a girl in a pale blue dress, hands folded neatly in her lap. June Delaney, 19 years old. Her hair was straight and plain, her face soft but forgettable. She wasn't what folks called a beauty, but there was something steady about her. Quiet, calm, the kind of stillness that made the world seem louder around her. Her father stood nearby, sweat shining on his neck, voice loud enough to drown out shame. "She ain't a looker, but she's clean and can cook," he called out. "Knows her sewing, too. Won't talk back neither. That's worth something, ain't it?" Quote. A few men chuckled from the shade, others turned away, pretending not to stare. Her mother leaned against a post, arms crossed tight, voice sharp as vinegar. "Not like Lucille," she muttered to no one. "Now she was the prize. Brought us good fortune, that one." Lucille, June's older sister, was the golden child, the one who got the ribbons, the one who married a banker's son. June had been the quiet one left behind, the one too plain for dreams. Now she sat on the steps of a saloon, waiting for her life to be sold. June didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just watched the dust swirl in the wind and thought how strange it was that hunger and heartbreak felt the same inside the chest. Empty, but burning. Then the sound of hooves broke through the murmurs. A rider appeared at the edge of town, tall in the saddle, shoulders broad, coat worn but clean. He didn't ride with the swagger of a showman or the laziness of a drifter. He rode like a man with purpose, the kind who didn't waste words or motion. Someone whispered, "That's Weston Turner." Heads turned. The name carried weight. He owned the Turner Ranch beyond the northern ridge. Hundreds of acres of grazing land, enough cattle to feed a county, and more money than most would see in a lifetime. But he was a quiet man, rarely seen in town. Folks said he'd lost his wife years ago and never spoke of it. He stopped by the saloon steps, dismounted, and tied his horse without a word. Dust clung to his boots as he walked forward, his shadow stretching long across the ground. June's father grinned wide, wiping his hands on his vest. "Mr. Turner! Didn't expect a man of your kind here today. Looking for a housegirl, maybe? This one's decent. Cheap, too." Weston didn't answer right away. His eyes found June's, not in the way other men looked at her. No judgment, no hunger, just quiet study. The crowd seemed to fade as the two of them held that brief, still gaze. "What's her name?" Weston finally asked. "June," her father said quickly. "But she'll answer to whatever you like." Weston nodded once. Then he reached into his coat, pulled out a small leather pouch, and handed it over. "This will do." Quote. Her father blinked, surprised at the weight of it. You sure you don't want to see what she can do first? We can." Weston cut him off, voice calm. "I said it's enough." Her father's fingers closed greedily around the coins. Her mother didn't say goodbye. She didn't touch her daughter's hand or even glance her way. She only said, "Behave now, June. Don't shame us more than you already have." June stood. Her knees felt weak, but her back stayed straight. She stepped down the stairs, every board groaning beneath her weight. The saloon keeper reached to help her up onto the wagon, but his grip was rough. She winced and pulled free. Weston watched, his jaw tightening but said nothing. When the wagon rolled out of town, the crowd drifted back to their errands. Only the dust remained, rising behind them like smoke. June sat rigid beside Weston, her hands folded tight in her lap. She could hear the leather creak as he steered, could smell the faint scent of pine and earth from his coat. He didn't speak. He didn't even look at her. The silence between them was heavy, yet not cruel, just strange, unfamiliar. She stole small glances at him, trying to guess what kind of man had bought her. Was she to be a servant? A secret mistress? A ghost in some faraway house? Shame burnt her cheeks at every thought. The wagon hit a rut. June flinched, her stomach growling loud enough to betray her hunger. Weston reached behind the seat, pulled out a folded wool cloak, and held it out. "Put this on," he said, eyes still on the road. She hesitated, then took it. It smelled of leather and pine sap. She wrapped it around her shoulders and felt the first warmth she'd known in days. The landscape rolled by, endless fields of dry grass and distant hills fading into blue haze. June's mind drifted back to her sister's laughter, her mother's cold words, her father's voice booming across the saloon porch. She ain't much to look at. It echoed until her chest ached. The wagon slowed near a wide stretch of open field, wildflowers swaying in the wind. Weston stopped the horses, climbed down, and turned to her. "Come," quote. June followed, her boots crunching in the dirt. The air smelled of grass and sun-baked soil. He looked out over the land, then back at her. "If you could choose," he asked quietly, "how would you live?" She blinked, startled. No one had ever asked her such a thing. I don't know," she said. "Somewhere quiet, I suppose. Somewhere I could be useful." He nodded once. "Then maybe we'll start there." He climbed back onto the wagon. She followed, unsure what he meant. But the silence between them had changed. It no longer felt like emptiness. It felt like waiting for something not yet spoken. As the wagon rolled toward Turner Ranch, the sun began to sink behind the ridge. The sky turned red, the land gold. And for the first time, June Delaney looked ahead, not back. She didn't know what waited for her, only that it wasn't shame. The Turner Ranch stretched wider than June ever imagined. Fences lined the hills like ribs of the earth, and wind rolled through the tall grass in slow waves. The main house stood on a rise above the creek, its porch wide, its windows open to the late summer light. It wasn't a mansion. It was solid, lived in, the kind of place that had known both work and rest. When the wagon stopped, a gray-haired woman stepped out onto the porch. She had strong hands, a kind face, and a look that said she'd seen everything and worried about nothing. "You must be Mavis," Weston said as he handed her the reins. "This is June." Mavis gave June a long, measuring glance, then nodded once. "Your room's ready, dear. Wash up and come to supper. No questions, no judgment." Just words that sounded like safety. Inside, the house smelled of wood, soap, and something baking. June followed Mavis up the stairs to a small room with a single bed, a washstand, and a window that faced east. A folded quilt lay across the mattress, stitched with the careful hands of someone who valued comfort over show. Mavis set down a basin of clean water. "We wake early here," she said. "Work starts before the sun does." June nodded. She didn't trust her voice yet. That evening, the dining room was quiet except for the sounds of forks and the ticking clock. Weston sat at the head of the table, his face half in shadow from the lamplight. He didn't speak much, just passed the bread, poured water, and listened as Mavis talked about feed prices and an upcoming storm. June kept her eyes down, eating in small bites. No one told her where to sit. No one barked orders. It was strange and unfamiliar, this silence that didn't hurt. After supper, she stepped outside. The porch boards creaked under her bare feet. The sky was wide and deep, the stars sharper than she'd ever seen. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote cried. She pulled Weston's cloak tighter around her shoulders and breathed in the smell of lavender and dust. Behind her, the door opened. Weston's voice broke the quiet. "You'll find the day is longer here," he said, "but the work's honest." She turned. "What work will you have me do?" He leaned against the post, arms folded. "Whatever needs doing. The garden's gone wild. The herbs need sorting. The horses could use company." June frowned. "So, I'm not a servant?" Weston's eyes softened. "You're not property, June." Her heart jumped at the sound of her name from his mouth, simple but careful. "Then why bring me here?" she asked quietly. He looked past her toward the dark hills. "Because I saw something the rest of them didn't." She wanted to ask what he meant, but he turned back toward the door. "Good night, Miss June," he said. And just like that, he was gone. Days passed. The ranch settled into rhythm. June woke before dawn to the sound of roosters and the smell of coffee. She worked beside Mavis in the kitchen, then spent her afternoons in the garden behind the house. The herbs there had grown wild, mint tangled with rosemary, sage choking the thyme. She knelt in the dirt, cutting and sorting, her hands finding peace in the work. When one of the ranch hands mentioned he couldn't read the medicine labels, June offered to help. The next day, 2 more joined, awkward and shy. Soon she was teaching them their letters under the big oak near the barn. Weston noticed from a distance. He didn't interrupt. He just watched for a while, then went back to his work, a faint trace of a smile in his eyes. The men began calling her Miss June, not because anyone told them to, but because respect came easy around her. In town, whispers started. Weston Turner bought himself a plain girl, the women said. Must be some reason for it. But Weston never answered the gossip. And when the blacksmith made a crude joke about it in the feed store, Weston looked him square in the eye and said calmly, "No one at my ranch is a possession. You'll remember that." The blacksmith never spoke her name again. That evening, as the sky turned pink over the pasture, a sharp cry echoed from the stables. June dropped the basket in her hands and ran. Inside, a young colt had caught its leg in a broken fence rail, thrashing and bleeding. Weston was already there, trying to calm the animal. "Hold its neck," he ordered. June didn't hesitate. She knelt beside him, hands steady even as the colt kicked and squealed. "We need clean cloth, boiling water," she said. "Now." "You know horses?" Weston asked, surprised. "No," she said, "but I know how to stop bleeding." They worked together, his strength, her calm. The colt's breathing slowed, its eyes softening. June tied the bandage tight, her fingers quick and sure. When she looked up, Weston was watching her. There was dirt on her cheek, a streak of blood across her jaw. Without thinking, he reached out and wiped it away with his thumb. His hand lingered for just a second too long. June's breath caught, but she didn't pull back. "You had a mark," he said quietly. "I didn't notice," she whispered. He let his hand fall, stepping back as if the moment itself had startled him. The air between them changed. Warmer, heavier. Neither spoke again that night. Later, after the stables quieted, June stood alone on the porch. The moon was full, silver light spilling across the fields. She closed her eyes, the cool air brushing her face. Behind her, the door opened, but no words came. Weston stepped beside her, silent. They stood that way for a long while, 2 souls, side by side, saying nothing and needing nothing more. From that night on, something unspoken lived between them. But it wasn't until the stranger came that everything began to change. Spring came soft to Hollow Creek. The wildflowers pushed through the grass, yellow and violet against the new green. June spent her mornings in the garden, hands in the soil, hair pulled loose from its braid. Weston worked the fields and rode the fences, but most evenings, when he returned, she'd be there on the porch, a small lantern beside her and a book in her lap. They didn't speak much, yet the quiet between them grew comfortable, almost tender. One afternoon, a wagon rolled up the drive. A man climbed down, thin, neat, dressed too fine for the dust. He carried a leather case and a rolled canvas. June watched from the window as Weston greeted him. The 2 men spoke briefly, then Mavis came to her door. "Mr. Turner wants you by the parlor window," she said. June frowned. "Why?" "Just sit there, dear," Mavis replied with a knowing half-smile. "Light's best at this hour." June obeyed. She sat by the tall window, sunlight spilling across her lap, book open to a page she wasn't reading. The man set up a canvas and paints. Then it struck her. He was a painter. Her heart thudded. "I don't understand," she began, but Weston's voice came from the doorway. "Stay just like that," he said. She turned toward him. "I'm not." "I know," he said quietly. "That's why." She froze, unsure what to feel as the artist began to paint. For 3 days she sat by that same window in the soft afternoon light while Weston went about his work. The painter said little. He painted her hands, her steady eyes, the way she tilted her head when the wind stirred the curtains. When the portrait was finished, Weston hung it above the stone hearth in the front room. It was the only painting in the house. Visitors noticed. They asked who she was. Weston's answer was always the same. "She's the one I don't wish to forget." After that, the town whispered louder. People called her lucky. Others called her foolish. Weston Turner could have had anyone, they said. A banker's daughter, a socialite from Austin. But he'd chosen the plain girl with quiet eyes. Then, one morning, a letter arrived, sealed with a silver crest. Weston read it over coffee and said nothing. Mavis caught the name on the envelope. An invitation from a wealthy family in Austin. They had a daughter of marrying age. Weston folded the letter once and tossed it into the fire. That evening, June found him mending a gate by the barn. "You burned a letter," she said softly. "Why?" He looked up. "Because I already have everything I want." She said nothing, but her heart beat faster. A few weeks later, another visitor came to the ranch. June was cutting herbs when she saw a figure in red stepping down from a carriage. Her sister, Lucille. Her hair was pinned high, her dress bright and expensive. She looked around the yard with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "June," she said, sweeping forward, arms open as if nothing had ever happened. "Look at you. I had to see for myself. They say you live like a queen out here." June stood still, the scissors trembling in her hand. "Why are you here?" Lucille's smile tightened. "You think you can hide? You think the world won't remember where you came from?" She looked toward the porch. "You should thank me, you know. If you weren't sold that day, you'd still be no one." June turned away. "You should leave." Lucille laughed softly. "I will, but you'll see me again." She kept her promise. 2 days later, she returned, with their parents in tow. Their father's voice was loud before he reached the steps. "We've come for our daughter," he declared. "She's been misled by a man who took advantage." Weston came to the porch, calm as ever. "You've come to the wrong house," he said. Lucille lifted her chin. "You think people will believe that when they hear you bought her?" "She's not property," Weston replied evenly. "I didn't take her. I chose her." Lucille's eyes flashed. "And when they find out what you did to me?" June stepped forward, her face pale. "Lucille, please." But Lucille was already turning away, her voice sharp. "You'll regret this, both of you." Rumors spread like wildfire. In town, Lucille told anyone who'd listen that Weston had wronged her years before, that he'd cast her aside and hidden the shame by marrying her sister. She said she was carrying his child. The story twisted and grew, retold by mouths eager for drama. Strangers stared at June in the market. The baker's wife whispered apologies. Shame returned like an old wound. That night, June packed a small bag and left a note on the table. "I cannot stay." By morning, Weston found her room empty. Rain had started to fall. He rode hard through the storm, his coat soaked, his eyes searching every trail through the hills. By sundown, he found a faint trail of footprints leading toward the old hunter's cabin near the ridge. The door was cracked open, smoke rising from a dying fire inside. June sat near it, wrapped in a wet shawl, her face pale, her eyes hollow. She didn't look up when he stepped in. "You shouldn't have come," she said quietly. "I should be nowhere else," Weston answered. "I left so they wouldn't hurt you." He knelt beside her, water dripping from his hat onto the floorboards. "You think I'd let you carry that alone?" His voice softened. "June, I spent years seeing faces that all looked the same, empty, painted, pretending. Then I saw you, and I saw truth." Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't know what they'll say." He brushed a damp strand of hair from her cheek. "If the world turns from you," he whispered, "then let me be the world that doesn't." Her breath hitched. She leaned into him, trembling. His arms came around her, strong and steady, holding her as thunder rolled outside. The storm raged, but inside, they found stillness. By morning, the rain had stopped. Weston built a fire and brewed coffee. June watched him quietly, the warmth of his coat draped around her shoulders. For the first time, she smiled. Small, fragile, but real. Days later, Weston rode into town and faced every rumor head-on. He stood before the crowd and told the truth. Not loudly, but clear. "I did not buy June," he said. "I saw her, and I chose her. I would choose her again." From the edge of the crowd, June listened, her heart steady. When Weston found her eyes, he reached for her hand. "You don't have to say a word," he murmured. She didn't. She just held on. Months passed. The town forgot the lies, but the Turner ranch didn't forget that day. In spring, Weston took June to a quiet field by the creek, where wildflowers grew in thick patches. "I bought this land yesterday," he said. She looked around, puzzled. "It's beautiful." He nodded. "They called you Plain," he said softly. "So I thought we'd call it Plain Meadow." Her eyes filled with tears. "Why?" "Because it's where everything plain becomes beautiful," he said. 1 year later, they were married there under an arch of willow and sage. No gold, no lace, just sunlight, laughter, and the smell of wildflowers. As they said their vows, the wind carried the words across the open land. "I will choose you," Weston said, "even when no one else does." "I will believe you," June whispered, "even when I forget myself." The meadows swayed in the breeze, like the land itself was bowing to their promise. And when the sun dipped behind the ridge, Weston Turner kissed the woman the world had once called too plain and saw the only face he'd ever want forever.